So I've been trying to get back into my Game of Thrones book again, and I figured I'd read the chapter that I have reached out loud. I'm on page 215 in the first book, and this chapter is called Arya. Let's begin. Can't promise I'll finish. Her father had been fighting with the council again. Arya could see it on his face when he came to table, late again, as he had been so often. The first course, a thick, sweet soup made with pumpkins, had already been taken away when Ned Stark strode into the small hall. They called it that to set it apart from the great hall, where the king could feast 1,000. But it was a long room with a high-vaulted ceiling and bench space for 200 at its trestle tables. "My lord," Jory said when father entered. He rose to his feet, and the rest of the guard rose with him. Each man wore a new cloak, heavy gray wool with a white satin border. A hand of beaten silver clutched the woolen folds of each cloak, and marked their wearers as men of the Hands household guard. There were only 50 of them, so most of the benches were empty. "Be seated," Eddard Stark said. "I see you have started without me. I'm pleased to know there are still some men of sense in this city." He signaled for the meal to resume. The servants began bringing out platters of ribs, roasted in a crust of garlic and herbs. "The talk in the yard is we shall have a tourney, my lord," Jory said as he resumed his seat. "They say that knights will come from all over the realm to joust and feast in honor of your appointment as Hand of the King." Arya could see that her father was not very happy about that. "Do they also say this is the last thing in the world I would have wished?" Sansa's eyes had grown wide as the plates. "A tourney," she breathed. She was seated between Septa Mordane and Jane Poole, as far from Arya as she could get without drawing a reproach from father. "Will we be permitted to go, father? You know my feelings, Sansa. It seems I must arrange Robert's games and pretend to be honored for his sake. That does not mean I must subject my daughters to this folly." "Oh, please," Sansa said. "I want to see." Septa Mordane spoke up. "Princess Myrcella will be there, my lord, and her younger than Lady Sansa. All the ladies of the court will be expected at a grand event like this, and as the tourney is in your honor, it would look queer if your family did not attend." Father looked pained. "I suppose so. Very well. I shall arrange a place for you, Sansa." He saw Arya. "For both of you." "I don't care about their stupid tourney," Arya said. She knew Prince Joffrey would be there, and she hated Prince Joffrey. Sansa lifted her head. "It will be a splendid event. You shan't be wanted." Anger flashed across Father's face. "Enough, Sansa. More of that and you will change my mind. I'm weary unto death of this endless war you two are fighting. You are sisters, and I expect you to behave like sisters. Is that understood?" Sansa bit her lip and nodded. Arya lowered her face to stare sullenly at her plate. She could feel tears stinging her eyes. She rubbed them away angrily, determined not to cry. The only sound was the clatter of knives and forks. "Pray excuse me," her father announced to the table. "I find I have small appetite tonight." He walked from the hall. After he was gone, Sansa exchanged excited whispers with Jane Poole. Down the table, Jory laughed at a joke, and Hullen started in about horse flesh. Your warhorse now. He may not be the best one for the joust. Not the same thing, oh no. Not the same at all. The men had heard it all before. Desmond, Jax, Hullen's son Harwin shouted him down together, and Porther called for more wine. No one talked to Arya. She didn't care. She liked it that way. She would have eaten her meals alone in her bedchamber if they let her. Sometimes they did, when father had to dine with the king or some lord or the envoys from this place or that place. The rest of the time they ate in his solar, just him and her and Sansa. And that was when Arya missed her brothers most. She wanted to tease Bran and play with baby Rickon and have Robb smile at her. She wanted Jon to muss up her hair and call her little sister and finish her sentences with her. But all them were gone. She had no one left but Sansa, and Sansa wouldn't even talk to her unless father made her. Back at Winterfell, they had eaten in the great hall and was half the time. Her father used to say that a lord needed to eat with his men if he hoped to keep 'em. Know the men who follow you, she heard him tell Robb once, and let them know you. Don't ask your men to die for a stranger. At Winterfell, he always had... Sorry, excuse me. It's something about the word men that got me. At Winterfell, he always had an extra seat at his own table, and every day a different man would be asked to join him. One night it would be Vian Poole, and the talk would be coppers and bread stores and servants. The next time it would be Mikken, and her father would listen to him go on about armor and swords and how hot a forge should be and the best way to temper steel. Another day it might be Hullen with his endless horse talk, or Septon Chael from the library, or Jory, or Sir Roderick, or even old Nan with her stories. Arya had loved nothing better than to sit at her father's table and listen to them talk. She had loved listening to the men on the benches, too, to free riders tough as leather, courtly knights, bold young squires, grizzled old men-at-arms. She used to throw snowballs at them, help them steal pies from the kitchen. Their wives gave her scones, and she invented names for their babies, and played monsters and maidens, and hide the treasure, and come into my castle with their children. Fat Tom used to call her Arya Underfoot, because he said that was where she always was. She liked that a lot better than Arya Horseface. Only that was Winterfell, a world away, and now everything was changed. This was the first time they had supped with the men since arriving in King's Landing. Arya hated it. She hated the sounds of their voices now, the way they laughed, the stories they told. They'd been her friends. She'd felt safe around them. But now she knew that was a lie. They'd let the queen kill Lady. That was horrible enough. But then the hound found Micah. Jane Poole had told Arya that he'd cut him up in so many pieces that they'd given him back to the butcher in a bag, and at first the poor man had thought it was a pig they'd slaughtered. No one had raised a voice or drawn a blade or anything. Not Harwin, who always talked so bold, or Alan, who was going to be a knight, or Jory, who was a captain of the guard. Not even her father. He was my friend, Arya whispered into her plate, so low that no one could hear her. Her ribs sat there untouched, grown cold now, a thin film of grease congealing beneath them on the plate. Arya looked at them. She felt ill. She pushed away from the table. Pray, where you think you're going, young lady? Septa Mordane asked. I ain't hungry. Arya found it an effort to remember her courtesies. May I be excused, please? She recited stiffly. You may not, the Septa said. You have scarcely touched your food. You will sit down and clean your plate. You clean it! Before anyone could stop her, Arya bolted for the door as the men laughed, and Septa Mordane called loudly after her voice rising higher and higher. Fat Tom. He was at his post, guarding the door to the Tower of the Hand. He blinked when he saw Arya rushing toward him and heard the Septa's shouts. Here now, little one, hold on, he started to say, reaching. But Arya slid between his legs, and then she was running up the winding tower steps, her feet hammering on the stone, while Fat Tom huffed and puffed behind her. Her bedchamber was the only place that Arya liked in all of King's Landing, and the thing she liked best about it was the door, a massive slab of dark oak with black iron bands. When she slammed that door and dropped the heavy crossbar, nobody could get into her room, not Septa Mordane or Fat Tom or Sansa or Jory or the Hound. Nobody. She slammed it now. And when the bar was down, Arya finally felt safe enough to cry. She went to the window seat and sat there, sniffling, hating them all, and herself most of all. It was all her fault. Everything bad that had happened. Sansa said so. And Jane, too. Fat Tom was knocking on her door. Arya, girl, what's wrong? He called out. You in there? No, she shouted. The knocking stopped. A moment later, she heard him going away. Fat Tom. He was always easy to fool. So I'm going to stop there. It's all right.